Today we're going to talk about Capture 2.0, and I'm very excited to be doing this. Welcome to everyone regardless of where you're joining from. Thank you so much for taking the time to let us talk with you a little bit about what we're providing in the form of automated discovery. So to take a quick look at the agenda, I promise to keep this pretty quick and painless today. We are evangelizing our ability to capture user activity in various ways, whether it be YouTube videos, which you may already be seeing, and I'll introduce you to some of those links a little bit later. We have a channel called Worksoft Inc. that I highly recommend that you join, and I'll try to remember to say that towards the end as well. But in addition, the webinar is the ability to convey some of that same type of information in a little bit more interactive mode, first by talking about it and then answering questions, obviously. So today we're going to take a look at where we stand with Capture, do a little bit of a live demonstration with respect to that, and then summarize a little bit about, why is this important? And the fact is that Capture is a very exciting feature for us, and we're really pouring a lot of effort into it. So, we're an Agile shop. We'll talk about how Capture can even assist you in your Agile methodologies, for example. But what that means is that things are changing rapidly. So I had to grab a line in the sand here to demonstrate the features as is, but I may even give a little bit of insight as to where I know we're heading as well. And let's get started. So the bottom line is, you are probably well aware, you probably know us as test automation, but we continue to innovate not only in that space, but around that space. And a little while back, we began to really innovate around discovery, which we found vitally important to make sure that we could test our applications the exact same way the users are using them. So the bottom line here is that the title is reflective of the fact that test automation in itself is not enough. It's important that test automation be applied the appropriate way so that we can be risk averse in the face of change, especially in our Agile methodologies that are really increasing the frequency of change that we're experiencing, not to mention that our applications are all interwoven. So change in any application effectively affects our true cross-platform end-to-end scenarios. So you've got to be able to be automated and eliminate that repetitive manual effort. But then that automation has to be very sustainable. We can't be spending all of our time maintaining that automation. And for those of you that know Worksoft, you know that our foundation is based on that concept, that the automation that we provide not only is quick and easy to work with, but it's very sustainable in the face of change. And that's our object action framework that we're built on. Still not enough. Quite honestly, you've got to be able to rapidly build that automation, and especially in this new Agile world, even our vendors are going Agile, which means the frequency of change is increasing, and it's really driving the repetition of testing within, for example, like sprints in that Agile methodology, Scrum methodology specifically. So automation is important, but the ability to build it quickly and for it to be sustainable is important. And today we're going to talk about building that quickly. So that's why we continue to innovate in the discovery space. And there's a few quotes on the screen that help back up what part of what I'm saying. And we've bolded some of the important parts. So like, for example, on the top, our challenges include the rate of change and documentation of processes. And clearly, we've got to be able to have that documentation as well as the automation, which is why we're innovating in that space. Second quote, knowing exactly what to test and exactly our business process, what our business processes are. The bottom line is, if we've documented our business processes and we're even using automation to test them, if we're still not exactly testing what the users are doing, we will have gaps. We are not comprehensive enough. And so therefore, companies, Worksoft specifically, is innovating around that discovery so that we can test exactly the same way the users are using the system, understand it first, and then basically carry that directly into our automated testing. Further, we have no process documentation. I mean, historically, and I think I'm preaching to the choir probably for everyone that's on this webinar, historically, to get something automated, the person that knew the process would have to write a dissertation as to what that process was, including granular steps and data. They would have to hand that off to a programmer to get that automated, and then those individuals would have to work together to really take it to the point where it was truly and effectively doing that testing, and then the minute something changed, the programming needed to change. So that really wasn't a sustainable operation. Bottom line, we're going to demonstrate the ability to quickly capture, which eliminates the documentation, or basically provides it automatically as a byproduct of that capture, saving that time. So we've basically been listening all of these years and throwing technology at pain. And the bottom line, employees basically have to sit around and wait for each other. It's laborious, boring, and gets harder over time to get people in there. We've got story after story of automation providing multiplayer, cross-platform examples in maybe 20 minutes that historically would take a company 2 weeks to test. And not that the individual steps themselves would add up to those 2 weeks, but the coordination of the players involved would easily add up to those 2 weeks. And so automation is extremely valuable in that way. So let's get refocused on talking about our innovation around capture and automated discovery. And for those, again, that know our product, we historically have had the ability to learn application screens. And in doing so, we're learning the objects from the screens, as mentioned, based on that object action framework. That matured into live touch long ago, where we can now interactively click on the fields that we want to build automation for, and that really began to facilitate the effort. And then capture in itself is much more like a recording experience, yet live touch still can be important sometimes for tactically going after a particular validation or a particular field on the screen. So we've really combined all of that, as well as Primo showing here is our object recognition capability, graphical object recognition and OCR type capabilities that reside within the product. Bottom line, we're bringing a bunch of this together in a very comprehensive, convenient package that we can provide to a user in standalone form. It doesn't require the remainder of our solution be installed on that workstation, for example. And so now we can really facilitate and accelerate the build of automation, because we can give this standalone capture, for example, to an end user who might just be doing their normal job. In fact, they don't even really have to go through training. At a minimum, they have to be able to start and stop capture. And we can take that activity, turn it into documentation, turn it into automation, and visualize and understand the activity that they're performing against the application to make sure that we have no gaps. So overall, that's the complete picture, and capture in itself is a very important part of that. So let's talk about some of the features, and this is where I struggle a little bit. We've got so much happening in this space that I literally did take a particular version to use for demonstrations today, and the version that I'm going to demonstrate is already a little bit outdated. This is moving very rapidly, so we have some very exciting things. But first and foremost, let's talk about the exciting things that are present in the latest version of capture. It's very visual. So those of you that are familiar with our capture, or can even just kind of understand what capture might be from just the verbal description of it being like a recording, we can collect that user activity basically, and now we can even present that visually if you choose to, and witness literally step by step as things are building. So the concept now is that the capture user can understand exactly what they're delivering. And if that's a distraction, by all means, they minimize it and they don't have to look at it. But you can understand how powerful this can be to understand exactly what you're delivering. So it's the next generation in capture. It's very visual. It provides immediate feedback, and we'll witness that in the demonstration. You have the ability to insert this activity through normal user interaction with the application, and above and beyond that, you can insert things like named activities, which will help paint that higher level functional picture as to what's really happening. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we proceed through the demonstration. But additionally, adding comments and very conveniently being able to convey information. Even though you might just be the capture user, you can disseminate your knowledge through commentary or additional narrative that you're adding into the steps that are being captured on your behalf. And screen captures, obviously a very important part of that documentation byproduct. It happens somewhat automatically, but you can also override and make sure to insert screen captures at vital points within the process. Editing capabilities are one of those areas that's expanding very rapidly. So at the moment, for example, if you see that you've made a mistake, you can easily highlight something and remove that step. That will continue. And that, when I talked about giving a little bit of insight into where we're going with this, let's just say that edit capability is going to really continue down the path of providing the ability for the user to manipulate exactly what they're capturing, so they can even refine it before they're delivering it. And of course, that doesn't have to be every user. Once again, it's important to mention that in some cases, we literally just want the user to turn it on and turn it off. But depending on the role that you're in, depending on the need that you have to deliver content, you will have capabilities at your fingertips for working with that content. The speed is very performant, listed here as 10x speed in Chrome, Firefox, and mobile. Across the board, you might be aware that we've been coming through some performance improvements. Our brilliant engineers realized that there were some efficiencies that they could provide. They weren't exactly even being asked for, and they realized this and applied it to our product, and suddenly our web and capture capabilities are running very fast at this point. And typically automation, I say if you were going to throw an average at it, automation is going to run 5 times faster than your fastest user on average. And it's really been exciting to see that increase. Some people will say, well, if we're doing lights out testing or triggered testing, and this is running somewhat in virtual machines in the background, basically, do I even care? But the fact is that we are constantly being inundated with more and more change, and the need to comprehensively test that, so it doesn't hurt for us to make sure that we're doing that in the most performant way and delivering that as fast as possible. Quickly document any end-to-end process, and I'm going to demonstrate that for you. It goes well beyond what I'm going to show you because you'll be using different applications, but I've got a few in my demo environment, so I wanted to demonstrate what it might look like for even a multiplayer experience. I'll play all of the roles, for example, just to show that that's possible. Yet in many cases, you might actually have certain individuals turning on capture for their portion of a business process, and then those things can literally and easily be drag and dropped together to construct your end-to-end scenarios. So working with the automation is less of what we'll focus on today, but just making sure that that's very clear, that capture is what begins this process, makes it very simple, and then through the rest of our solution, we continue to make that very easy to construct exactly what's needed for functional and or integration and or regression and or RPA or robotic process automation needs. And then coming soon, Auto GenDoc. I'm going to go ahead and bring some captures that I do into the analyze portion of our solution, where I will generate the documentation and show that step by step. But what's being reflected here is the fact that even within capture, we're heading down the path of providing a very convenient mechanism to immediately deliver you that step-by-step documentation as a result. All right, so capture 2, automation for everyone, really following the Agile Manifesto, I think, that came out in about 2001, where the concept is that really everyone participates in QA, and that's never more true than now. So our automation solution can be seamlessly put into any Agile methodology. The testing never defines the methodology, obviously, but what's important is that the testing be flexible enough to fit into any methodology that's being used. And what you'll find is that with capture and our object-oriented approach without programming really provides that mechanism for anyone that needs to participate tactically in the automation experience. Now functional experts can very easily turn on capture and capture that activity. They can distribute that as a standalone agent, as mentioned, so that any user can turn this on and off and provide content. They can make the inline comments, as we talked about in the features, and produce that documentation. And then that content basically gets conveniently collected into our central database or into our solution for others to take that further as needed and consume that material. So from a more of a tester role, they can leverage that the capture for even exploratory testing. I mean, we're really to the point, and I think this will come across visually in the demonstration, that if anyone is doing any manual effort anymore, they may as well turn on Capture, because the end result is that we can automatically document that for them, and we have then the automated steps built automatically that we can choose to carry into our test bed for various types of testing. So there's really no reason to not capture things at this point. It's very easy to edit the tests by leveraging things like Live Touch that's integrated with Capture, and I'll give you a quick example of that in our demonstration as well. And take advantage of new object integration and edit capabilities right within Capture, and that also is somewhat of that planting the seed that the capabilities within Capture will continue to extend rapidly over time. So this is going to be an exciting area to keep an eye on. So what can you test with Capture 2.0? Really just about anything. So if you're in your environment and you're doing anything manual, as mentioned, there's really no reason why you wouldn't now begin to use Capture and allow it to help you document and collect that activity. So applications running Box, Windows Explorer, mobile applications, I'm going to make it a point to include that today in the demonstration. SAP GUI has been challenging for many automation vendors over the years, and it's like slicing butter basically, and we'll include some GUI even against a HANA system in our demonstration today, and then anything else running on the desktop. So the concept is that it really provides end-to-end capabilities from old to new. But you know, in that same sentence, I would say that even if what you need to capture is not fully end-to-end, but yet is just a segment of what is needed, you simply capture that, and we can easily then drag those together like Legos to construct what is that overall business process. All right, so with that, let's do a live demonstration. So I'm going to hop over to my demo image, and as mentioned, you know, I've got a few applications available to me that I can use to demonstrate. So I was trying to mimic what our product manager has done recently in somewhat of a realistic fashion, if you will, in terms of working with an order and validating a price for a material and things like that. So let's get started, and I'll show you what I'm referring to. Once again, you know, the demonstration is going to be more reflective of what could be a multiplayer experience, but I'm going to play all of the roles and just kind of even show that even if that's the case, you can easily construct and put all of that information seamlessly together or collect it very conveniently. So I'm starting Capture. This is the very visual form of being able to collect user activity. I'm going to show you here under the interfaces at the moment. I've got mobile, SAP, and web enabled. This list has already grown and will continue to grow. I believe that Oracle Forms is now will be in the downloadable version that we're going to give you a link for. And the live touch capabilities have extended. So it's a hard target to shoot at the moment because it's receiving a lot of attention, and it's because it is so important in terms of the value that it's bringing to the table. So let's witness what it is that I'm referring to in that way, basically. I've got Capture running, and as mentioned, at a minimum, I would need only to start and stop Capture, and that's done here with the record button at the bottom of the Capture. But in my scenario, what I'm going to do is walk through the creation of an order. We'll use Fiori for that in the browser. And then I'm going to bring up Excel and do a little bit of a manual step that can still be documented and included within the end-to-end scenario for validating the material price. And then we'll go into the SAP GUI against our HANA system. This is a 1610 system I happen to be hitting, and we'll do the delivery of our order. And then last but not least, I'm teed up here on my mobile device, the iPhone 6 at this point, and we'll capture the send of a payment to round out this overall business process. So to get started, I'm simply going to click on the Start button. I've got my Fiori screen sitting there and available, and I'm going to go ahead and give this a named activity. I'm going to call this my webinar demo. And this is an example, and this will become very clear shortly when we begin to look at this more at a functional level. this is where the user can inject naming of functions that are being performed and or commentary along the way. So let's get an example of all of this. We're going to start our webinar demo by placing an order in Fiori. So I'm going to head down that path for creating a sales order. And unfortunately, this is kind of the boring part of me just being the user, but it is the opportunity for you guys to now witness how the content gets built automatically for the user as they proceed through whatever it is their process is. So you can see as I'm putting in the details within my order, it's automatically building those steps. I'm gonna, while I'm using my IDES system, not probably nearly the requirements you may have on your system in a good way, just for demo purposes. It doesn't take very long for me to get through placing my order. Let's just do a test purchase order here and give this a material. And we'll just order one of those today. Okay, now I'm about to save my order, but in all reality, this process might consist of things that the user wants to inject for the automation roles. And what I'm referring to is, for example, one of the key elements of this particular hypothetical business process is that I want to validate the net value. So the live touch capability is included within Capture within this fingerprint. And so if I would invoke that basically and come over here, by clicking on the net value, I can very easily inform Capture that I want it to verify the net value. And I'll scroll over and show you that it's validating that the net value is equal to $17.55, basically. And then my intent here is to go ahead and also include, maybe let's do a screen capture. That's the little camera icon. We'll take a screen capture of the entire screen that includes the data that we've put. Let's save our order. And I'm going to click on that order number, because oftentimes what we're going to want to do additionally is include or use that order number further within our process. And in fact, let's make that comment. Here's that little icon, collect order for delivery and fulfillment. And I won't go all the way through fulfillment just because I'm too slow of a user to go through all of that, but we're going to hit several systems along the way. But you can see that we've very easily collected all of the necessary steps involved in performing our Fiori. I'm going to pause this just for a second, and let's minimize our Fiori. And the next step in this particular process was to validate the price. So we included a verification step so that we can have the automation in itself verify this value. But I can, sometimes have additional manual steps involved. So if I were to restart my capture, I've got my Excel screen here, and let's put in a little manual step to say validate material price. And this might be a special price sheet that we want to make sure that we're validating something maybe that changes over time. In any case, it's just inevitable that there will be manual steps, or there are most often manual steps within your business processes, and yet we want to collect those. And really, we're going to ultimately turn that into full automation. But from a capture perspective, we can very easily collect that manual activity so that that can be conveyed properly and used then effectively within the automation realm. All right. So the next step is my GUI. And basically, once again here, I'm going to just invoke or make sure that I'm turned on from a recording perspective here. And let's include another step to do the delivery of our order. And I've forgotten the order number, so bear with me. I'm going to scroll back here and take a look. In here, and I temporarily lost my scroll bar. I apologize for that. 36806. There we go. Okay. So I've got the the documentation of this content along the way, and what I need to now do is the delivery for that order. So I'm going to head for the outbound delivery. And put in the necessary information. And save the delivery. And additionally, we want to live touch that. So I'm going to re-invoke the fingerprint, come over here and highlight, for those of you that are familiar, I know I've said that a lot, but I know a lot of you are already using our product or familiar with our product, but live touch is the ability for us to see any of the objects on the screen. We used it earlier to verify the net price within the web, and here I want to collect that delivery number as a part of the status bar on my GUI screen. All right, so the next step that we want to perform then is to head for the mobile. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize my GUI at the moment and make sure that I'm turned back on here. And let's say that we want to do the send payment activity within the mobile. So I'm going to go ahead and name that. And I've my mobile sitting here teed up for me to log in and create the payment. So just like capturing against web, just like capturing it against SAP GUI, the mobile basically is going to collect all of my activity as I go through this. I'm going to give it a phone number, a name, the amount that we were working with, and then a country. And then we can send the payment. Are you sure? Yes. And then we've got our final balance, and that might be good to document for the business process. So let's include another screen capture as well. All right, so we've performed quite a bit of activity. Let's see, 4 applications or 3 with a manual step using Excel at this point. And what I'm going to do is send that up into our solution. For those of you familiar, that part of our solution called Analyze. And I am going to use a cloud version of this, but any part of our solution can be in private cloud or on-premise. And in this case, using the cloud is very convenient because I can collect all of that activity very centrally, and we'll go take a look at what it is that we've generated. So I've successfully put that into Analyze. Before leaving here, let's just mention, though, that as a capture user, which is really the role that I was playing or the hat that I was wearing for the moment, I can begin to, or I can turn on capture on and off as much as needed throughout the activity that I'm performing throughout my day. So we often see a little bit of a separation in roles where many capture users are providing content to maybe more QA or IT or power users that are finalizing or doing the final edits for data-driven, intelligent, programming-free automation for integration and regression style testing, or shift that left into functional testing, or shift that right again into RPA. But in any case, let's go to where we've collected that, which is in Analyze, as mentioned. I need to authenticate there. And without too much explanation, but hopefully enough to not be confusing, Analyze is where we collect all captures. There can be various sources for the content coming in, but capture is a prevalent one. And we bring all of that information in, and the bottom line is typically what your intent is in consuming that information is that you want to look at a particular area. So we have a very robust set of filters. Those can very conveniently be saved as what we refer to as a workspace. So bottom line, I'm navigating to a workspace that reflects my own activity. And in fact, it's at the moment showing me my activity for this month. Let's narrow that down to just today and refresh here. And I still have some activity, but you can see here's my webinar demo. And if I would highlight this variant, I have performed this activity. Not surprisingly, from a demonstration perspective, it overlaps a little bit with some of the other activity that I've performed. And that's what we're witnessing here, is that when we begin to pull in these captures, we will naturally consolidate down the activity into the unique flows that the users are taking through the system or the applications, so that we can understand exactly what activities are being performed. So that's very important from understanding what the users are doing so that we can test just like the users are using the system. And that's one of the things we were talking about in the earlier slide. You know, again, if you could have very detailed documentation of your business processes, but I can almost sit here and guarantee that some of your users are going outside of those boundaries. And they're not doing it to cause problems. In some cases, they found efficiencies, or in other cases, maybe they're not aware and they've got some inefficient parts to their activities. It's just important that we be aware of that so that we can test that way, and that's what Capture is providing so seamlessly. We also have a mechanism to see this in list form. So right at the top of the list, you can see this is the capture that I just performed. And whether it would be from the visual function view or from here, I can create that documentation, or really request that documentation. Let's continue to call this my webinar demo. And I can do that as either a PDF or a Word document. I'll generate that as a PDF. And then let's go back over here to the workspace. Before I bring that document up, which is being generated here in the My Documents area, you know, we talked about the ability for various users to do captures. And so let me go back to my month view, basically, and you can see that some of that same activity has been performed. Like here's where I performed the capture of an order. In other cases, I was working with SuccessFactors and creating Salesforce in this case, and creating an opportunity. I'm sure I've got SuccessFactors activity in here as well. The bottom line is that the user may just be capturing their own part, but we can very easily construct those segments into end-to-end form, whether it be within this space or within the automation space itself. It's very easy to understand and then work with that content. But let's take a quick look at the step-by-step documentation that we've created. I requested that as a PDF, so what I'm going to do is just kind of scroll down through this a little bit. I'll shrink it down a little bit for more of a page view. But step by step, as I went through the creation of my Fiori order, we have documented not only screen captures in full when we see that screen change. That's kind of that automatic screen capture that I was referring to, but also the step-by-step tactical steps that the user has taken to produce or to basically represent that activity. In this case, generating the order. Here we've collected that order number. I used that. Well, first we went into Excel, and here I took a screen capture so that we could validate that price. That was just the injection of a representation of a manual activity. Here we've gone over to SAP. This is the GUI hitting the HANA system and produced the delivery. Continue to scroll through that and save, and then verifying that delivery number. That also makes it extremely simple for us to latch onto that number and use that from an automation perspective in other applications. And then here's my mobile application, where once again, step by step, creating or documenting and automating the steps involved for sending the payment from a mobile perspective. So, you know, as I would continue, it begins to look all the same. It's extremely exciting that we can just leverage Capture and its capabilities to seamlessly collect this information, and then as a part of the Worksoft solution, understand as a result what it is that our users are doing. And then, you know, it's basically taking some of this content, and as easily as I requested the documentation, it would be create automation that would send that over into the step-by-step automated form that we could then package in various ways for any type of testing. So let's bounce back to the presentation for the moment and kind of summarize. Basically, Capture is going to allow you to accelerate change. It absolutely enables agile delivery of enterprise application changes. So, for example, functional experts can run Capture to document the stories, and then once the feature is complete, basically, and then the testers can consume that information to finish the automation and schedule it for continuous testing purposes. I will elaborate ever so slightly. It is really much more of a separate conversation, but we're well in tune with our clients and their journey into Agile, in some cases from Waterfall, for example. And there are always hybrids of these methodologies being applied. And the bottom line, and the important thing to say here, is that the automation solution that we're providing is so flexible and fits in so seamlessly, regardless of the methodology, and in doing so is providing the necessary value, because what some people don't realize is that when you actually go from, for example, a waterfall to an agile methodology, let's say Scrum, for example, there is actually more repetitive testing that takes place, basically by testing the baseline as well as net new features within each sprint. And as an example, when we are talking with companies about participating in their agile methodologies, there's a variety of smaller DevOps where the testing is being included directly within the sprint. And then for more of an enterprise level, maybe a scaled agile framework that many of the vendors are starting to leverage. And for larger enterprise endeavors, you might have more of an N+1 model where at the end of the sprint, capture is seamlessly used to capture those stories, but then it may become part of the backlog for the next sprint to accommodate for all of that testing. Anybody that's involved is probably well aware. Well, I grew up as a developer, but basically, you know, the developers are going to work until the last day of the sprint to deliver that content, but then capture can really expedite the creation of the testing, even in that very short window at the end of the sprint. To accommodate for the needs. So, you know, one mention here is that Cardinal Health is basically an example where they've applied capture to leverage the acceleration of creating automation, and it's being widely adopted as part of their scaled agile framework implementation. And Cardinal spoke on our behalf down at Sapphire recently, and have a great story. And I don't know if I've got those links in this particular deck, but that's information that's easy to find on our website, or we can easily follow through by getting that information and more of those stories as needed. So the other seed that I wanted to plant here in the summarization is that our automation is extremely transferable. I mean, basically what you've witnessed is that we can collect user activity, kind of represented at the lower left here with the capture window. And what it comes down to is, you know, it's extremely important what every user is doing, and every step is an asset, and a collection of steps is a process that can easily be plug and played into various other scenarios. So you can be testing literally down to the step or functional level, and driving that in repetitive ways for comprehensive functional testing. And yet that as that comes together and is constructed into more segments and or end-to-end scenarios, now you're talking about the use of the same automation yet for integration and or regression type testing. And then I know I've mentioned it several times, but that can continue to shift right, quite honestly. The whole concept of RPA is automating either full or fractional parts of our business processes in production. And our automation runs the same way, typically with a little more governance, but in a production environment. So, you know, our automation, we're telling it who to log in as and what steps to perform. And so it's very agnostic to the environments that it's running in. And historically, there's been a ton of value around the use of it for automation, but more and more we're seeing the RPA space grow. And I didn't want to leave without talking about the fact that whether you're down at the functional level or over on the far right at the production RPA level, it's the same automation. And being able to reuse that is how we're saving all of that effort. So last but not least, Worksoft in itself, and the reason we're doing what we do is we're becoming an insurance policy for your assurance team. Everyone can be involved. There's no programming. Anyone can be a capture user. Anyone can read and understand the narratives of the automation itself and assist in making sure that that automation in any form is doing exactly what's needed. We have impact analysis for SAP that identifies the critical business processes and tests what matters most. This is extremely important. For example, I'm just going to give a quick little story on this one. One example, a use case of this is you're bringing in a few transports into your SAP system today, yet you've got 500 end-to-end regression scenarios. Which ones do you need to run? Bottom line, impact will analyze the handful of transports that you might just be bringing in today and point you directly to the certify automated processes that would assist you in that testing and would let you know if there's anything missing, so that we really can be testing everything that is being injected in the form of change into our SAP environments. We're participating in, as mentioned, the agile methodologies of our clients up to and including continuous testing, even automatic triggers for like CI/CD, where our testing responds accordingly so that perhaps a deployment or or a delivery can be automatically performed, basically. So we're continuing to extend the API capabilities against our solution and have the ability to leverage the API from other solutions. And so overall, we're very interoperable with the outside world and participating in this DevOps and safe agile methodologies. Continuous integration and deployment, as mentioned, even to the extent of other things triggering our automation and our automation responding and triggering then the subsequent events. Reporting and compliance, we're seeing more use of third-party dashboard where we realize we're not going to own everything. We're going to do what we're really good at and collect all of the very granular information about everything that we do, and then provide that, again, through that API layer that I was referring to, so that you can even choose to remain doing dashboarding with something that you may already know and love, and yet begin to include the activities from the Worksoft solution. And then extend automation, and this is kind of what I've been subtly, or maybe not so subtly, referring to along the way, but the fact is that anything that a manual user has done against your systems can be automated. So the question is, what really becomes a good candidate for that automation? And I'm always quick to say that anything that is tedious, especially if it's repetitive, I mean, that's an extremely good criteria for pulling value out of the automated version of repetition. So anything that's tedious, repetitive, data-driven by all means, and we make that simple, even if there's decisions involved. So, these processes never require programming, yet can still contain logic that can make decisions just like a user might implicitly do in the face of the use of the application. So by all means, start with what provides the most value, but every client has continued to extend the use of the automation beyond testing and in various ways to maximize the value. As mentioned, a few of the resources, this will be provided even after the fact. So there's a download link for the standalone 2.0 capture. And one of the questions I'll maybe preemptively or proactively answer this. Someone might already be thinking, well, how is this licensed within your solution? Maybe we're already using your product and do we have access to this? The bottom line is standalone capture goes hand in hand, one for one with your certified licenses, as well as one for one with your analyzed licenses. So if you have X number of certified licenses, you can use X number of standalone captures to collect content from the field. And I say it that way, but I'm always quick to go back and say, really, our solution doesn't care. We'll talk about this is easy to use for a business analyst or an SME. That's absolutely a true statement. But I know a lot of QA and IT people that also light up capture and very rapidly build automation. It's really just an expedited mechanism for doing that. And anyone now that needs to be able to provide that content can do that. So here's a downloadable link. We've talked verbally about the licensing. And then here's some additional videos. Capture 2.0 has a homepage with some of these videos on it, as well as Chris Kraus, our product manager, does a really nice job of very rapidly taking things that we're delivering and putting that into YouTube form and getting that out there under our channel. So I monitor his activity to keep up myself, again, because things are moving quite rapidly. So at this point,